It was a warm afternoon when the sun shone brightly over the city park. People were out enjoying the fresh air, some walking their dogs, others jogging along the paths, and a few simply sitting on benches, reading books or chatting with friends. Among them there was a woman who stood out, walking with a sense of confidence, her steps sharp and purposeful. She was in her mid-30s with light skin and a sense of pride that radiated from the way she carried herself. Her name didn't matter much to her that day, as she was simply focused on her routine, walking her dog, who, though sweet, had an unruly streak. The dog tugged at its leash, eager to explore, pulling her along faster than she wanted. She glanced ahead at the benches, deciding it was time to sit and enjoy a break. Her day had been long, and this was her moment of peace. At one of the benches, a man sat reading a book. He was black, dressed casually in a well-fitted shirt and jeans, a pair of glasses perched on his nose. He looked like someone who enjoyed the quiet moments of life, someone who didn't mind being alone in a crowded world. His face held a calm expression, as though he had the patience of someone who knew how to live at his own pace. The woman's dog, excited as ever, suddenly yanked hard on the leash, pulling it out of her hand. The dog darted forward, knocking the man's drink off the bench as it ran past. The drink splashed onto the man's lap, leaving him stunned for a second. The woman rushed over, calling the dog back with an annoyed voice. She was embarrassed, but more than that, she was irritated. Her dog was well behaved most of the time, and this little incident was ruining her quiet moment. As she walked up to the man, she didn't bother to offer an apology at first. Instead, she stared down at him, her eyes narrowing. "You know, if you weren't sitting so close to the path, this wouldn't have happened," she said, her voice cool and sharp. The man looked up, his face a mixture of surprise and confusion. "It's all right," he replied, trying to stay calm. It was just an accident, but the woman wasn't satisfied. She crossed her arms and raised her chin slightly, the air of superiority that often surrounded her becoming evident. "You should have moved out of the way when you saw my dog coming," she insisted, her tone now more forceful. The man blinked, trying to understand why she was being so defensive. "It was just a minor mishap. I didn't expect the dog to be so quick," he said, his voice even and patient. "It's fine, really." But the woman was already on edge. She had dealt with people before who were quick to blame others for their problems, and now here was a stranger, trying to act as if it were no big deal, as if he didn't care that her dog had ruined his drink. "You don't understand," she continued, her voice rising. "People need to be more careful. This could have been avoided if you were paying attention." Her words weren't just about the spilled drink anymore. There was something deeper in them, an undercurrent of frustration that the man didn't fully grasp. He started to feel the tension rising, a sense that the situation was becoming more than just about an accident. Her attitude was starting to feel like a personal attack. The man stood up slowly, trying to diffuse the situation. He wiped his pants off and said, "I'm sorry your dog made a mess, but I don't think this is something we need to argue about." His voice was calm, but there was a firmness in it, a quiet request for peace. But the woman wasn't backing down. She took a step closer to him, her dog still tugging at the leash. "It's your fault for not paying attention," she muttered, her voice dripping with judgment. "If you were smarter, you would have seen what was happening before it was too late." The man's jaw tightened. There was no reason for her to be so rude, to treat him like he was somehow at fault for something he couldn't have controlled. He had been sitting there minding his business when suddenly this woman's dog had come out of nowhere. He took a deep breath, trying to keep his calm. "Look," he said slowly, "I didn't ask for this to happen. I didn't ask for your dog to run into me. We both got caught in an accident, but there's no need to make it worse." But the woman's expression hardened. She didn't like being told she was wrong. In fact, she wasn't used to being wrong. She was used to people around her accepting her word without question. Because of who she was, because of her background, she believed that her opinions were facts and anyone who disagreed was simply misinformed or rude. Her pride was slowly turning into frustration, and the more the man tried to remain calm, the more her anger flared. She stepped closer again, this time raising her voice. "You know, I don't have time for this." "I don't need to deal with your attitude. You should be grateful I didn't take the dog and leave you here to clean up the mess." The man paused, stunned for a moment by her words. Grateful? For what? He had done nothing wrong, and yet she was treating him like he was the one at fault. His patience was starting to wear thin. "I'm not the one who's been rude here," he replied, his voice now more direct. I'm not the one who's been blaming someone for something they didn't do. The woman's eyes widened in disbelief. No one had ever spoken to her like that before, at least not in such a direct way. The audacity of this man to stand his ground, to challenge her authority, shook her. She raised her hand as if to dismiss him with a wave. But then something inside her snapped. Maybe it was the way he had spoken, or maybe it was the growing sense of powerlessness she felt in that moment. Without thinking, she slapped him across the face. The sound of her palm connecting with his skin echoed through the park, and for a moment everything went quiet. The people walking by stopped and turned their heads, unsure of what had just happened. The man stood there, his cheek stinging from the blow. The woman immediately felt a rush of regret, but her pride wouldn't let her take it back. She stood there, waiting for some kind of reaction, expecting him to cower, to apologize, to back down. But instead, the man stood perfectly still. His eyes locked onto hers, calm and unwavering. "Don't touch me again," he said, his voice low but firm. He didn't shout or raise his hands in anger. He just spoke the truth, a boundary drawn in a moment of quiet authority. She took a step back, realizing just how far she had crossed the line. The situation that had begun with a simple accident had escalated far beyond what it should have been. And now she was the one left stunned, unsure of what to do next. The man didn't wait for her to say anything more. He turned and walked away, leaving the woman standing there, her heart racing, unsure of what had just happened or why it felt like such a turning point in her life. The next morning, the woman found herself tossing and turning in bed, unable to shake the memory of the incident from the day before. She had gone to bed angry, convinced that the man at the park had been in the wrong. But as the night wore on, and the anger slowly turned into silence, she began to feel a discomfort she couldn't quite place. It wasn't just about the spilled drink or the fact that her dog had caused the mess. It was something deeper. She kept replaying the moment when she slapped him. At first, she told herself it was justified. He had been rude, dismissive, and hadn't taken her seriously. But now, as she lay awake in the dark, she realized that something inside her had shifted in that moment. She had acted out of frustration, out of a sense of entitlement that she hadn't even fully understood. The man had been calm, patient, and then he'd stood up for himself. And she had slapped him, as if she could control the situation just because of her anger. Her thoughts turned to the man's reaction. He hadn't screamed, he hadn't raised his fists, and he hadn't been scared. Instead, he had simply walked away. His calmness made her even more unsettled. He hadn't been afraid of her, nor had he reacted in anger. That was something she wasn't used to. People usually backed down when she raised her voice. They accepted her authority without question, and here was someone who didn't. It wasn't just about the physical altercation. It was the emotional impact that stuck with her. She had assumed that because of who she was, she could control situations. But in that moment, her behavior hadn't just been out of line. It had been a sign of deeper issues within herself. She had treated him like he was beneath her, like his feelings didn't matter. And when he didn't react the way she expected, it threw her off balance. The next day, she went about her usual routine, but something felt different. She couldn't stop thinking about the man from the park. The incident had left a mark on her, and as much as she tried to ignore it, she kept wondering who he was. Why had he reacted the way he did? How could he be so calm when she had just disrespected him so completely? The thought of him sitting there reading his book while her dog knocked over his drink, and then calmly accepting the accident, it had made her angry at first, but now it made her curious. Who was this man? And why hadn't he reacted the way most people would have? It was a mystery she couldn't seem to shake. In the days that followed, she found herself noticing things in her own behavior that she hadn't before. She was more aware of her tone, of how she spoke to people, and how often she assumed the worst of them. It was a small change, but it was a start. She realized that she had been carrying an air of superiority with her for years. Her upbringing, her background, everything about her had taught her that people should treat her with respect no matter what. But now, she was questioning that. Maybe respect wasn't something that could be demanded, it had to be earned. And maybe, just maybe, she had been wrong in assuming that others owed her that respect just because of who she was. Later that week, she went back to the park, hoping to see the man again. She hadn't expected to, but the thought of seeing him lingered in her mind. She wanted to apologize, to say that she was sorry for what had happened. It wasn't just about the slap, though that was part of it. It was about the way she had treated him, the way she had assumed that he would simply accept her words without question. The park was quieter that day, the sky overcast, and the air cooler than usual. She walked along the path, glancing at the benches, searching for him. She didn't know why she was looking for him or what she would say if she found him, but there was a part of her that felt she needed to make things right, to try to explain herself. And then there he was, sitting on the same bench reading his book just like the first time. It felt like an odd sense of déjà vu, like the universe had brought her back to this moment for a reason. She stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do. She hadn't planned on this, and now that she was here, she felt a wave of nervousness wash over her. She took a deep breath and walked over to the bench, stopping a few feet away. He looked up from his book and saw her standing there. His expression didn't change, but there was a quiet recognition in his eyes. He didn't stand up or offer a greeting. Instead, he simply waited for her to speak. I just wanted to say that I'm sorry," she said, her voice softer than she expected. It felt strange to apologize, but at the same time it felt necessary. "What I did wasn't right. I shouldn't have spoken to you like that." The man didn't respond immediately. He just closed his book, placed it on the bench next to him, and looked up at her. There was a moment of silence, and she could feel the weight of it between them. "I shouldn't have slapped you," she continued, her words more hesitant now. "It was wrong. I was angry and I let that control me, but I've been thinking about it and I know I was out of line." The man nodded slowly, acknowledging her words, but he didn't say anything. She couldn't tell what he was thinking, whether he accepted her apology or if he was just humoring her. "I've been thinking a lot about that day," she added, "and I realize that I've spent so much of my life expecting people to treat me a certain way. I guess I never really thought about how my actions affect others. And I'm sorry for that. I didn't mean to make you feel like you were beneath me." There was another long pause, and for a moment she wondered if he was even going to say anything at all. But then finally he spoke. "I appreciate your apology," he said quietly. His voice was calm, the same as it had been when she had slapped him, when he had stood there without a reaction. "But words are just words. It's your actions that matter more." His words stung a little, but she didn't argue. Instead, she nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. She had apologized, but that didn't mean everything was forgiven. "Actions," as he said, spoke louder than anything. "I know," she said softly, "and I will make sure my actions show that I've learned from this." The man gave a small nod and picked up his book again, opening it to the page he had left off on. It was clear that the conversation was over, but in some ways it felt like the beginning of something. She had taken a step forward, not just in apologizing, but in realizing that she wasn't always right, that she had a lot to learn. She turned to leave, but before she could take a step, he spoke again. "Just remember, it's not always about being right. It's about how you treat people." She didn't know if he was just offering advice or if he was speaking from experience, but his words stuck with her as she walked away. She had a lot to think about. Over the next few days, the woman couldn't shake the words the man had said to her. "It's not always about being right. It's about how you treat people." They lingered in her mind, echoing every time she interacted with someone. She found herself paying closer attention to the way she spoke to others, to the way she carried herself. It was a strange feeling, almost as if she had woken up from a long sleep and was seeing the world in a new light. One afternoon, she was at the grocery store, going through the aisles as she usually did, picking out items without much thought. As she reached for a box of cereal, she noticed a man standing beside her, reaching for the same box. For a brief moment, their hands touched, and she pulled hers back, feeling a little embarrassed. The man gave her a small smile, one of those polite, everyday smiles that most people give when they don't know what else to do. She smiled back, but something in her was different now. Instead of brushing past him like she usually would, she stopped and looked at him. "Sorry about that," she said, her voice softer than usual. "I didn't mean to grab it at the same time." The man didn't seem bothered. "No worries," he said, still smiling. "We were both just trying to get the same thing." For a moment, the woman stood there, unsure of what to do. She hadn't meant to start a conversation, but something in the exchange felt different. It felt genuine. It was small, but she realized that she hadn't reacted to the situation the way she might have before. In the past, she might have just grabbed the cereal and walked away without thinking twice. But now it felt important to acknowledge the moment, to show that she cared about the interaction, no matter how small. Have a good day, she said, smiling back at him. You too, he replied, and they both went on with their shopping. As she walked through the store, she couldn't help but think about the small conversation. It had been so simple, but it had left her with a warm feeling. It was a reminder that kindness didn't have to be grand or dramatic. It could be in the small moments, the fleeting exchanges that often went unnoticed. That evening, she sat down at her kitchen table with a cup of tea, reflecting on the changes she had started to notice in herself. She realized that she had spent so much of her life focused on herself, on what she wanted, what she thought she deserved, that she had forgotten how to truly connect with others. She had been so wrapped up in her own world that she hadn't seen the world around her. The man at the park had opened her eyes to that, whether he realized it or not. His calmness, his ability to stand his ground without resorting to anger or frustration, had shown her a different way to be. It wasn't about being dominant, about asserting power or control. It was about respect, about treating others with dignity, no matter the situation. She had always believed that she was in control of her life, but she was beginning to understand that true control wasn't about forcing things to happen. It was about knowing when to let go, when to allow life to unfold without trying to dictate every moment. The next morning, as she got ready for work, she made a conscious decision to approach the day with a new mindset. She didn't know exactly how it would play out, but she was determined to be more mindful, more present, and less focused on herself. She wanted to see people, really see them, and treat them with the kindness and respect they deserved. At work, she found herself interacting with her coworkers in a way that felt different. When a colleague asked for her help with a project, she didn't brush him off as she might have done before. Instead, she took the time to listen, to offer her input, and to truly collaborate with him. It felt good to be involved, to contribute without expecting anything in return. Later that day, she had a meeting with her boss. Normally, she would have walked into the room with her usual confidence, prepared to assert herself and make her points known. But today was different. Instead of focusing on how she could impress him, she focused on how she could listen to him, how she could understand his perspective. The meeting went smoothly, and as she left his office, she realized that she felt more at ease than she had in a long time. She hadn't tried to dominate the conversation or control the outcome. She had simply been herself, allowing the exchange to happen naturally. That evening, as she walked through the park again, she couldn't help but think about how much her life had changed in such a short amount of time. The park, once a place where she had felt above others, now felt like a space for quiet reflection, a place where she could reconnect with herself and the world around her. As she walked along the path, she noticed a few people sitting on benches, chatting, reading, or simply enjoying the peaceful surroundings. She felt a sense of calm that she hadn't felt before, and for the first time in a long time she felt at peace with herself. And then, as if fate had a hand in it, she saw him again. The man from the park. He was sitting on the same bench reading his book just like before. She had almost forgotten what had brought her to this moment. The apology, the way he had stood up for himself, the way he had shown her a different way to live. She walked over to him, her steps measured and calm. As she approached the bench, she could feel the familiar knot in her stomach, but it wasn't the same kind of anxiety she had felt before. This time it was more of a quiet anticipation. "Hi," she said softly. He looked up from his book and smiled, the same calm smile from before. "Hey," she took a deep breath, feeling the words she had been meaning to say for days finally forming. "I just wanted to thank you," she said, "for everything. For the way you handled that situation, for the way you treated me. It made me realize a lot of things about myself." He looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "I didn't do anything special," he said quietly. "I just tried to be honest and stay calm. Sometimes that's all it takes." She nodded, feeling a sense of gratitude toward him that she hadn't expected. "Well, it meant a lot to me, and I wanted to apologize again for how I acted." He nodded in return, a small, understanding smile on his face. "It's okay. I'm glad you found a way to see things differently." They both stood there for a moment, the weight of the conversation settling between them. It wasn't a grand reconciliation, but it felt like a small moment of mutual understanding. "I guess that's all we can really do, right?" she said, her voice gentle. "Yeah," he replied. "Just take it one step at a time." With a final nod, she turned and walked away, feeling lighter than she had in days. It wasn't the end of her journey, but it was another step forward. A step toward being the person she wanted to be, a person who saw others, who treated them with kindness and respect. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. The next few weeks passed by quietly, but the changes that had begun inside the woman were undeniable. She had started to see the world differently, less about her needs and more about those around her. It was a slow transformation, but one that felt natural, like she was shedding layers she didn't even realize she had been carrying for years. One day, while walking to work, she noticed the streets seemed a little busier than usual. The sun was shining brightly and the air felt fresh, but there was a certain tension in the atmosphere that she couldn't quite explain. She saw people rushing by, hurrying to their destinations, some of them lost in their phones, others looking stressed. It was the same scene she had walked through every day, but today it felt different. Today she felt connected to it all in a way she hadn't before. As she crossed the street, she saw a young woman struggling with a stroller that was stuck on the sidewalk. The woman was trying to push the stroller up onto the curb, but it wouldn't budge. The woman seemed frustrated, her face scrunched in effort as people walked by, oblivious to her struggle. Without thinking, the woman approached her, offering a simple, "Can I help?" The young woman looked up, surprised, but quickly nodded. "Yes, please, thank you," she said, her voice grateful but a little strained. Together, they managed to lift the stroller onto the curb, and the young woman let out a relieved sigh. "I don't know what I would have done without you," she said, smiling. "I've been stuck here for a while." The woman smiled back, feeling a warmth inside her. "No problem at all," she replied. "I'm just glad I was able to help." As she continued her walk to work, she felt a sense of fulfillment, not from the praise or the thank you, but from the simple act of being there for someone. It was a small thing, helping with a stroller, but it had made a difference in that moment. And that feeling, that quiet sense of connection, was something she hadn't experienced in a long time. At work, she found herself noticing similar moments more frequently. She became more aware of the people around her, their expressions, their moods, the little things that often went unnoticed. She smiled more, listened more, and found herself engaging in conversations she might have ignored before. One afternoon, she was sitting at her desk when a colleague came in looking stressed. "I can't seem to find that report I was working on," the colleague said, her voice full of frustration. "I know I saved it, but it's not showing up anywhere." The woman stood up, walked over to her colleague's desk, and offered a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, I'll help you look for it." They spent the next few minutes searching through the files together, and soon enough they found the report in an unexpected folder. Her colleague sighed in relief. "You're a lifesaver," she said. "Thank you so much." The woman simply nodded, feeling grateful for the opportunity to be there for someone else, to offer help when it was needed. It wasn't about the recognition. It was about the connection, the understanding that sometimes just being present for someone was enough. As the weeks went on, the woman's life seemed to become a series of small, meaningful moments. She found herself more connected to the people around her, more aware of their needs, and more open to offering help in whatever way she could. It was like she had discovered a new purpose, one that wasn't about herself but about the people she interacted with every day. And yet, even with all these positive changes, there were times when doubts crept in. She wondered if she was really changing, or if she was just pretending to be someone she wasn't. There were still moments when she caught herself slipping back into old patterns, moments when she felt annoyed by the world around her, or when she judged someone too quickly. One evening, as she walked home from work, she passed a street musician playing a guitar on the corner. The music was soft and soothing, a perfect accompaniment to the quiet evening. She stood there for a few moments, listening to the melody, feeling the cool breeze on her skin. As she watched the musician, she saw a young man approaching, carrying a backpack. He stopped in front of the musician and glanced at the guitar case, where a few coins and bills were scattered. He hesitated for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a few dollars. Without a second thought, he placed the money in the case, nodded to the musician, and walked away. The woman smiled, touched by the gesture. It was a small act of kindness, but it felt significant. She thought about how easy it would have been for the young man to walk by without even noticing the musician. But he hadn't. He had taken a moment to acknowledge him. to give something of himself without expecting anything in return. As she continued her walk home, the woman couldn't help but reflect on the changes in herself. She realized that true kindness wasn't always about grand gestures. It was in the small things, the everyday actions that spoke volumes about who we are. And while she wasn't perfect, she was learning. She was learning how to be present, how to offer help, and how to make the world a little better, one small action at a time. A few days later, as she sat at a cafe sipping her coffee, she saw the man from the park again. He was sitting at a table by the window, reading his book just like the first time they had met. She hesitated for a moment, unsure of whether to approach him, but then she remembered how much he had impacted her life, how much he had made her reflect on her own actions. She stood up, walked over to his table, and greeted him with a smile. "Hi," she said softly. He looked up, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "Hey," he said, setting his book down. "How's it going?" "It's going well," she replied, feeling more comfortable than she had expected. "I've been thinking about what you said to me, about treating people right." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Yeah, I remember. It's something I try to remind myself of, too." She sat down across from him, feeling a sense of connection in that moment. "I've been trying to change to be more mindful of how I treat others," she said. "And I just wanted to thank you for making me realize that, for showing me that kindness is more important than being right." The man smiled, a genuine, understanding smile. "I'm glad to hear that. It's not always easy, but it's worth it." They sat there for a while, talking about life, about the little things that made a difference in the world. And for the first time in a long time, the woman felt at peace. She wasn't perfect, and she knew that. But she was trying, and that was enough. As she left the cafe that day, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. She had learned something important, something that would stay with her for the rest of her life. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about being present, being kind, and making the world a little better, one small action at a time. The days that followed were filled with small moments that continued to shape the woman's growing sense of self. She had come a long way from the person she once was, the one who expected others to cater to her needs, who judged people based on her own assumptions. Now she was learning to take a step back, to be more mindful of her actions and how they affected the world around her. One evening, as she sat on her balcony sipping tea, she reflected on everything that had changed in the past few months. The woman who had once felt so detached from the world now found herself more in tune with it, more connected to the people she interacted with. It wasn't always easy, and there were still moments of doubt and frustration, but she had learned how to embrace those moments as part of the journey, rather than as setbacks. Her thoughts wandered back to the man from the park. He had been the catalyst for her transformation, the person who had unknowingly helped her see herself in a different light. She hadn't seen him in a while, but she often thought about him. His calmness, his ability to stay composed in the face of her anger, had been a turning point for her. It had shown her that strength wasn't always about power. It was about grace, humility, and the ability to remain calm when the world seemed to be spiraling out of control. One afternoon, as she walked through the park, she spotted a familiar figure sitting on the same bench where they had first met. The man was reading a book just like before, and for a moment she hesitated. She hadn't planned on seeing him today, but there was something about the sight of him that felt comforting, like a reminder of how far she had come. She walked over to the bench, her step steady, and approached him. This time there was no nervousness, no uncertainty. "Ain't he?" She had learned that life was about embracing the present, not worrying about the past or future. When she reached the bench, she smiled and greeted him, just as she had done the first time they spoke. "Hey," she said, her voice calm and warm. The man looked up from his book, his expression softening when he saw her. "Hey," he replied, his voice just as calm as hers. "It's good to see you again." "I was just thinking about you," she said, taking a seat beside him. "I've been reflecting on everything that's happened these past few months, the changes I've made in myself, the way I see the world now. I just wanted to thank you for helping me realize all of that." He smiled, a quiet understanding in his eyes. "I didn't do anything special," he said. "You did the work. You chose to change, and that's what matters." She nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I know, but it was your words, the way you handled that situation, that really made me think." It made me realize that I had been living my life in a way that wasn't truly fulfilling. I was so focused on myself, on what I wanted, that I lost sight of what really mattered. He gave a small, thoughtful nod. Sometimes it takes a moment, a small shift in perspective to open your eyes to things. But once you see them, it's hard to go back. The woman smiled, feeling the truth of his words resonate with her. She had learned so much, but she also knew that her journey was far from over. Every day was an opportunity to learn more, to grow more, and to continue practicing kindness, patience, and understanding. So she began, looking at him with a curious smile. "What have you been up to lately? Still reading all those books?" He chuckled softly. "Yeah, I've been reading a lot. But I've also been thinking about things just like you. Life has a way of making you reflect, doesn't it?" She laughed, feeling a sense of camaraderie between them. It wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic changes. It was about the small, quiet moments that shaped us, that helped us grow. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "I've been thinking a lot about how we treat people. It's like we go through life so focused on ourselves that we forget how important it is to just be kind, to listen, to understand, to offer help when we can." He nodded, his gaze distant as he considered her words. "I think kindness is one of the most underrated things in the world. It doesn't have to be grand or flashy. It can be as simple as a smile or offering a helping hand when someone needs it." The woman felt a deep sense of understanding in that moment. She had come to realize that kindness wasn't about seeking recognition or praise. It was about showing up for others, even when no one was watching, even when it didn't serve her own interests. The man glanced at her with a knowing smile. "I'm glad you're getting it," he said quietly. "You've always had it in you, you just had to recognize it." She smiled back, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "I think I'm just beginning to see it." They sat there for a while, talking about life and the little moments that made a difference in the world. It wasn't a conversation full of profound insights, but it felt meaningful nonetheless. It felt like a reminder that we are all connected, that our actions, no matter how small, ripple out into the world in ways we might never fully understand. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the park, the woman stood up from the bench, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. It wasn't the end of her journey. It was just another step forward. But it felt like a milestone, a moment of quiet reflection where everything seemed to fall into place. "I should get going," she said, turning to face the man one last time. "But I'm glad I saw you today. I'm glad we had this chance to talk." He stood up as well, his expression sincere. "It's always good to see you. Keep going, you're on the right path." With a smile and a final nod, the woman walked away, feeling lighter than she had in a long time. She had learned so much, but she also knew that there was always more to learn, more to give, more to experience. She wasn't the same person she had been months ago. She wasn't perfect, and she never would be. But she had found a sense of peace, a sense of purpose in the small acts of kindness, in the quiet moments of connection. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. As she walked through the park, the world seemed to open up before her. The trees, the flowers, the people passing by, they all seemed brighter, more vibrant, more alive. She had learned to see the beauty in the everyday, to appreciate the small moments that made life worth living. And with that, she knew she was ready for whatever came next, knowing that every step, no matter how small, was a part of her journey toward becoming the person she wanted to be. As the woman continued to embrace the changes within herself, life seemed to unfold in unexpected ways. The transformation she had undergone wasn't just about changing her actions. It was about learning how to see the world differently, how to approach each day with a sense of purpose and openness. She had shed the weight of old habits, replacing them with new perspectives, and it had begun to feel like everything in her life was aligning, each small step bringing her closer to the person she wanted to be. One morning, she woke up with a sense of calm. It was a Sunday, the kind of day that felt perfect for reflection and self-care. The world was quiet outside, and she could hear the soft chirping of birds as she made her way to the kitchen. She prepared herself a simple breakfast, a bowl of fruit and a cup of coffee, and sat by the window, watching the sunlight filter through the trees. For a long time, she had spent her Sundays trying to accomplish everything, tasks that were meant to be productive but never truly brought her peace. But now she was learning how to enjoy the simple moments, like watching the changing light or savoring a quiet meal. It felt good to slow down, to give herself permission to rest. As she ate, she thought back to the man in the park, the one whose words had sparked a shift within her. They hadn't spoken in weeks, but his impact on her life had been profound. His calm demeanor had taught her the power of composure, the importance of listening before reacting, and the deep value of treating others with kindness and respect. It wasn't just about the big moments. She realized it was about how you showed up in everyday life, in the way you spoke to strangers, in the small gestures of care and empathy. It was about being present, truly seeing people for who they were instead of letting judgment or assumptions cloud your vision. Later that day, she decided to take a walk through the park. It had become a place where she found peace, where she could reflect on her thoughts and connect with the world around her. As she walked along the familiar path, she saw families with children, people jogging and couples enjoying the sunshine. The park had always been a place of bustle, but now it felt like a sanctuary, a space for quiet reflection amidst the noise of the world. She found herself smiling at the small moments, people helping each other, sharing laughter, enjoying the simple pleasures of the day. It was a reminder that despite all the chaos in the world, there were moments of pure joy, of kindness that often went unnoticed. She sat down on one of the benches, taking in the scene around her. The gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the trees, and the sun continued its slow descent, casting a golden hue over the park. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply, allowing herself to simply exist in the present. As she sat there, a familiar voice broke through her thoughts. "Mind if I join you?" She opened her eyes and saw the man from the park standing in front of her, holding a coffee cup in his hand. She smiled warmly, gesturing to the space beside her. "Of course, please." He sat down and they both fell into a comfortable silence, watching the world go by. After a few moments, he spoke again, his voice calm and steady. "I've been thinking a lot lately," he said, "about how we often get so caught up in our own lives that we forget to take the time to appreciate the small things. The moments that really matter." She nodded, feeling a sense of connection in his words. "I know what you mean. I've been trying to do the same, to slow down, to appreciate the little moments that make life special." He looked at her, a thoughtful expression on his face. "It's funny how the most meaningful moments are often the simplest, like sitting here in the sun watching the world go by. We don't need anything grand, just a moment of peace." She smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the conversation. "It's amazing how much we overlook, isn't it? We're always chasing after something bigger, something better, when the truth is that happiness often comes from the smallest, simplest things." The man nodded, his eyes focused on the horizon. It's easy to get lost in the noise of life, but it's in the quiet moments that we find clarity. For a while, they both sat in silence, content to simply be in each other's presence. It wasn't about talking or doing anything extraordinary. It was about sharing a quiet space, allowing their thoughts to flow naturally without pressure. As the afternoon wore on, they eventually stood up, both feeling refreshed by the conversation. The woman smiled at him, grateful for the connection they had shared. "I'm really glad we talked," she said. "Me too," he replied. "Sometimes we need someone to remind us to slow down and appreciate the little things." With a final nod, they parted ways, but the woman felt lighter than she had before. It wasn't about the grand gestures or the big changes. It was about the small moments, the quiet exchanges that made life feel meaningful. As she walked home, she thought about how much she had learned over the past few months. She had come to realize that life wasn't about achieving perfection or chasing success. It was about being present, about treating others with kindness, and about finding joy in the simple moments. She had learned to appreciate the quiet, to value the small gestures of kindness, and to embrace the changes within herself. It wasn't always easy, but she was learning every day, and that was enough. That evening, as she sat down to dinner, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. She was no longer focused on what she didn't have or where she needed to go. Instead, she was content with where she was, with who she was becoming. And for the first time in a long time, she felt truly at home in her own life. As the weeks passed, the woman continued to embrace the changes within herself. Life had become a series of small moments, moments that brought her joy, reflection, and a deeper connection to the world around her. She had learned that it wasn't the grand, sweeping gestures that mattered most, but the quiet acts of kindness, the patience, and the ability to show up for others in the most simple and genuine ways. One morning as she walked through the city, the sun shining brightly overhead, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for everything that had led her to this point. She had come so far, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and yet she knew that her journey was far from over. There was still so much to learn, so much to give, and so many people to connect with. Her thoughts were interrupted when she saw a woman sitting on a bench near a busy intersection. The woman was holding a piece of paper in her hands, looking down at it with a troubled expression. She appeared lost in thought, unsure of what to do next. Without thinking, the woman walked over to her, offering a soft smile. "Are you okay?" she asked gently, her voice warm. The woman looked up, surprised by the question, and for a moment she seemed unsure of how to respond. After a few beats, she sighed and shook her head. "I'm just trying to figure something out," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. "I don't know where to go from here. I feel like I'm stuck." The woman sat down beside her, nodding in understanding. "I know how that feels," she said quietly. "Sometimes life can feel overwhelming. But you don't have to figure everything out all at once." The woman glanced at her, a small spark of hope lighting up in her eyes. "It's just, I'm not sure what the next step is. I feel like I'm at a crossroads and I don't know which way to go." The woman smiled gently, offering a reassuring presence. "It's okay to not have all the answers right now. Life isn't a straight path. It's full of twists and turns. Sometimes the most important thing is to take it one step at a time and trust that the right direction will reveal itself when the time is right." For a moment, they both sat in silence, allowing the woman's words to settle in. The woman on the bench seemed to relax, her shoulders lowering as the tension that had been holding her began to ease. "Thank you," the woman on the bench said softly. "I needed to hear that." The woman nodded, feeling a sense of peace from simply offering a listening ear. "We all need a little reminder every now and then," she replied. "It's okay to not have it all figured out." As they sat there, the woman began to realize that this was exactly what she had been seeking all along. Moments of connection, moments where she could make a difference, however small. It wasn't about grand gestures or achievements. It was about showing up, being present, and offering what she could to those around her. Later that week, she found herself at the park again, walking along the familiar path where she had spent so many reflective afternoons. As she walked, she noticed a man sitting on one of the benches, holding a small child in his lap. The child was laughing, her joy infectious as she pointed to the birds overhead. The woman smiled at the sight, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. It was a simple moment, but one that reminded her of the beauty in everyday life, the small moments of connection that brought people together. She walked past the bench, but then paused, feeling a strong pull to stop. She turned around and approached the man, who was now looking up at her with a friendly smile. "Hi," she said, her voice gentle. "I just wanted to say that it's really beautiful to see you two enjoying the day together. It's moments like these that make life so special." The man's smile widened and he nodded. "Thank you. It's not always easy to slow down, but I try to cherish the small moments with her." The woman nodded in agreement. It's easy to forget how important those moments are, but they really are the things that matter most. The man's eyes softened and he looked down at the little girl in his lap. "You're right," he said, his voice full of warmth. "She reminds me of that every day." They shared a brief, silent moment, watching the child laugh as she chased after a butterfly. It was a moment of simple, unspoken connection, an acknowledgement of how powerful and important these everyday moments truly were. As the woman continued her walk through the park, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. It wasn't about seeking out big opportunities or waiting for dramatic changes. It was about embracing the everyday moments, the small acts of kindness, and the quiet conversations that made life meaningful. A few days later, she ran into the man from the park again, this time at the cafe she frequented. She spotted him sitting near the window, sipping his coffee and reading a book. She walked over to him, smiling warmly as she approached. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. He looked up and smiled back, his eyes lighting up in recognition. Not at all, he said, motioning to the seat across from him. It's good to see you again. She sat down, feeling a sense of ease in his presence. They didn't immediately dive into deep conversation. Instead, they shared a quiet moment, sipping their drinks and watching the world outside. It felt comfortable, like they had known each other for much longer than they actually had. After a while, the woman spoke. I've been thinking a lot about what you said the last time we talked, about how life isn't about the grand gestures but the small moments. I've been trying to live that way. He nodded thoughtfully. It's a good way to live. Sometimes we get so caught up in looking for something bigger that we miss the beauty in the small things. She smiled. Exactly. And I'm learning to appreciate those small things more every day. I've realized that I don't need to be constantly chasing something. I just need to be present in the moments that are already here. The man smiled in return, his eyes warm. It's good to hear that. It sounds like you're really starting to find your balance. She nodded, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. I think I am. It's not always easy, but I'm learning. They continued to talk, not about anything particularly profound, but about the simple, everyday things that had come to matter most. And for the first time in a long while, the woman felt truly content with where she was in life. She wasn't trying to chase anything or prove anything to anyone. She was simply living, being present, and embracing each moment as it came. When they parted ways later that afternoon, the woman felt lighter than she had in a long time. She had learned that life wasn't about perfection. It was about finding joy in the little things, in the everyday connections, and in the quiet moments of peace. As she walked home, she realized that for the first time in years, she had found a sense of fulfillment that had nothing to do with achievements or outward success. It was about being true to herself, embracing the journey, and allowing herself to simply exist in the present. The woman had come a long way in her journey of personal growth, but life, as it always does, continued to present new challenges. She had learned that change was a constant, that every day offered an opportunity to learn something new, whether about the world, other people, or herself. As she moved forward, she found herself increasingly aware of how much more there was to experience and how little she truly knew about the world around her. One morning, as she sat on her balcony with a hot cup of tea, she reflected on everything that had led her to this point. The change had been gradual, but now, looking back, it felt as though she had crossed a threshold. The woman who had once been reactive, who had focused so much on herself and her own problems, had grown into someone more thoughtful and aware of her surroundings. She was no longer consumed by worry or the need to control every situation. She had learned to embrace uncertainty, to trust that things would unfold as they were meant to. As she finished her tea, the woman decided to take a walk through the park. It had become her favorite place, a quiet escape where she could reflect, observe, and reconnect with herself. The park had witnessed so many of her thoughts, her moments of clarity, and her realizations. Every visit felt like a quiet reminder of how much she had grown. As she walked, she noticed a group of people gathered near the fountain in the center of the park. They were laughing, talking, and enjoying each other's company. The woman smiled as she passed by, appreciating the simple joy that radiated from the group. It was moments like these that reminded her of how important human connection was, how much we all craved those moments of laughter, togetherness, and belonging. Her thoughts were interrupted when she saw a man sitting alone on a bench by the side of the path. He was staring out at the water, his face troubled. There was something about him that caught her attention, something in the way he seemed lost in thought, his eyes distant. The woman felt a pull to approach him, a desire to offer some small comfort, even if only through her presence. She walked over to the bench, her footsteps quiet against the gravel path. When she reached the bench, she hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to begin. But then she remembered the power of simply being present, of offering a moment of connection without any expectations. She smiled gently as she sat down beside him. "Hi," she said softly. "It's a beautiful day, isn't it?" The man glanced at her, his eyes flicking from the water to her face. For a moment, there was a flicker of surprise, then a small, weary smile. "Yes, he replied, his voice quiet. "It is." They sat in silence for a few moments, both watching the water ripple gently in the fountain. It wasn't uncomfortable silence, just a quiet space, a shared moment of peace. Finally, the woman spoke again. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her tone gentle. She didn't expect him to open up, but she wanted him to know that she was there if he needed to talk. The man looked at her for a long moment before speaking, his voice low and almost hesitant. "I don't know," he said. "I've just been feeling kind of lost lately, like I'm stuck and I don't know what the next step is. I don't know how to get out of this feeling." The woman nodded, understanding all too well what it felt like to be at a crossroads, unsure of where to go next. "I think we all feel like that sometimes," she said softly. "Like we're standing still, waiting for something to change. But maybe it's not about knowing the next step. It's about being open to whatever comes, trusting that things will work out." The man looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "I've never thought of it that way," he said slowly. "I've always been so focused on trying to figure everything out, to have a clear plan. But maybe it's okay to not have all the answers." The woman smiled, feeling a deep sense of connection in that moment. "Exactly. It's okay to not have everything figured out. Life isn't a straight line, and it's not always about knowing exactly what comes next. Sometimes it's about being present, trusting yourself, and taking things one day at a time." For a long time they sat there together, in silence and in mutual understanding. The woman felt grateful for the simple act of being able to connect with someone, to offer a moment of comfort. She didn't have all the answers, but she had learned that sometimes just listening and being there for someone was enough. As they parted ways, the man smiled at her, his expression lighter than it had been when she first sat down. "Thank you," he said. "I didn't realize how much I needed that." She nodded, offering a reassuring smile. "You're welcome. We all need a little reminder every now and then." Later that afternoon, the woman found herself reflecting on the conversation she had had with the man. It wasn't a groundbreaking discussion, but it had been a meaningful exchange. It reminded her of how simple acts of kindness, of being present for someone, could make a real difference in their day. She realized that this was the essence of human connection, the small, often unspoken moments that held so much weight. It wasn't always about doing something big. It was about showing up, offering support, and being there for others when they needed it most. That evening, as she sat in her apartment, she thought about how much her own life had changed. She was no longer driven by the need to control everything, to constantly push for more. She had learned to appreciate the quiet moments, to find peace in the ordinary things. She was beginning to understand that true fulfillment didn't come from achievements or success. It came from the relationships we built, the kindness we shared, and the way we showed up for the people in our lives. The next few weeks were filled with more small but meaningful moments. She continued to take walks in the park, to listen to the stories of strangers, and to offer her presence wherever it was needed. Each day she learned more about the power of simplicity, of living authentically, and of embracing the unexpected. One day, while walking through the park, she came across a woman sitting alone by a tree. The woman looked like she was deep in thought, her eyes distant. The woman felt that familiar pull, the desire to connect, to offer comfort, and so she approached her. "Is everything okay?" she asked gently, sitting down beside the woman. The woman looked up, surprised, and then smiled faintly. "I'm just trying to figure things out," she said, her voice soft. "I'm at a point in my life where everything feels uncertain and I don't know where to go next." The woman nodded, recognizing the feeling. "I've been there," she said quietly. "Sometimes the most important thing is to just let yourself feel whatever you're feeling. It's okay to not have all the answers. Life isn't about having a clear path, it's about trusting that step by step the way will unfold." The woman smiled, a little more brightly this time. "Thank you," she said. "I needed to hear that." The woman smiled back, feeling a warmth spread through her. "You're welcome. We all need reminders that it's okay to be unsure. It's okay to take your time and figure things out."